Hi guys, welcome to interface and layout training in After Effects. So here we are in After Effects 2017 CC. So basically we want to go through a little bit about the interface and the different layouts. Just so you know, when you launch After Effects for the first time, you get familiar with different icons and menu. So let's take a look. The interface, as you see it, is pretty straightforward. These are divided up in panels. So if I click over here, we get a blue square around this panel. So this panel is the project panel. This is here where you will import all your assets, and you can basically import almost everything. Photoshop files, movies, footage, PSD files, you name it, PDF, I mean anything. So all the assets will come over here. So this is the project panel. This panel is the composition panel. So here is where when you import a footage over here and drag it down here to the timeline, it will show up here. Or even if you double click an asset over here, for example a Photoshop file, a picture file or whatever, it will also pop up here. So this is the project panel, this is the view panel, and it has some controls down here, which we'll go through when we open that window. So this panel is the timeline, and here's where you drag in all your files, and they'll be stacked in alphabetic order. So just like layers in Photoshop, it's almost the same principle here. The top layer, the one you have in the top, will be the one that's in front of everyone else. So if you have two layers here, number one, number two, whatever you have, if number one is one color and the other one is another, then the top color will dominate the screen because it's laying in top in the stack order. So, but there's different ways you can get around that, blending modes, transparency, and so on. So these are the three main windows you'll be using. Over here, you have your info panel, audio. This info panel just shows the RGB A alpha channel, the colors mode, and these are your Y and X coordinates. As you see when I move the mouse around, you see how the coordinates will move accordingly. Okay, and over here, you can also remember you can drag these out when you're on the line here. Then you get like a split icon here. You can just hold down the mouse and drag it out. Here you have different options. Character is meant for text, so you have different text options here: size, color, increasement in height, the pixels. Also if you want to change the text font, it's in here. The bold option, change color modes, everything is in here. Effects and preset. This one. So this is all the effects and presets you have loaded in your After Effects library, including the third-party plugins. In my list here, for example, you can see Knoll Light Factory, Magic Bullet. These are third-party plugins you can buy. But this is basic training series is mostly about using the native effects After Effects comes shipped with. So one more noticeable thing to mention regarding these panels is they are all draggable and movable. When I say that, I mean, like, let's take example. All of the sections you can reorder. So if you hold down the mouse, for example, up here in the top bar, hold down the mouse, drag it, and then you can see how the purple color applies on the area where you will be dropping it. If you release the mouse, let's see what happens. So now I have my audio panel over here. I can take it back again here. I can also take it down here. So you could, there's many different layout options. You can also move things over here. So and as you see over here, this tab here is the standard. That means that's the standard layout. So if you mess too much around and you were like, oh, how can I go back to the standard layout? Then it's up here in the standard layout section. You can reset it. You can edit the workspaces. So workspaces in After Effects is actually the whole interface you see as it is now. You can save this as a new workspace, give it a name, so you can call it your own name, and then whenever you load After Effects, it will of course load that workspace, and or you can go back to the standard ones. The essential is the essential tool After Effects things you might be needing when you start up. So this is just the essential tab. You can also go in and edit those. So screen option is basically what it says. You can change different screens sizes on the interface. So if we go back, to the project panel, so there's different ways you can import files on. I would definitely recommend using the shortcut Control I. Otherwise, File, Import, File, and here's the shortcut, keyboard shortcut Control I. When you import a file, you go in and check whatever file you want. Let's just take an example here. This little footage, import that. So now we have a footage imported into After Effects. It comes up here in the project panel, and here you have some different information about that footage, the clip you just imported. You have the FPS, frames per second of the footage. You have the dimensions. It's a full HD, and you can see the name of the file, and it's an MP4 file, the codecs, and the audio output. And when it's in here, before you actually drag it down to the new composition button here, you can right click and choose interpret footage, press main, and in here you can make some changes if you want that. For example, if you know it's not a drop frame, it's a non-drop frame, use another frame rate. If you know it has a special separate fields, you know, the interlacing of the footage, you can do that, all that in here. Also, there's a advanced color management profile in here. So when you have it here, as I said before, if you double click it, the footage will just come up in the pop up in the comp window, and from here you can play it, you can drag it, the CGI current time indicator, and the green bar here is the preview that's been loaded into your memory. So that's also something to take note of, that After Effects is a real RAM hogger. It really loves RAM. So the more RAM you have, the better. And of course a good CPU. Sorry guys. Okay, so that's the time indicator. Let's go back up to the footage and drag it down to create a new composition. So when we released it on the create new composition, we got a new timeline here, a project down here, and this one is actually the same file as we see up here, but now it became with a composition icon on it. That's because now it's in a composition, and the composition name is the same name. You can always change the name, but this is the name because you just drag the footage from here and down and release it on the composition button. So when you have it down here, you have different options here. So the eyeball, pretty straightforward. If you press the eyeball, it disappears. Click it again, it comes. So this is just the visibility of the layer. And this is the sound, mute, unmute, solo. If you had multiple or more than one layers here, then you can just solo the one you want to only see. So if you solo this one, you will only see this layer, no matter how many layers is down here. And then here are the brute force of After Effects. This arrow, when you drop this down, you get to the properties, and the properties is where all the magic happens in After Effects. So this is the transform properties, and this is the audio. There's no effect because you haven't applied any effect for it. So if you hit the transform arrow, then a drop down comes with multiple property parameters you can change. So you can change the anchor point, X and Y, the position, X and Y, scale, 100%, and rotation in degrees, and the opacity. So let's see what happens when we decrease the opacity. Look at the layer up here when I decrease it. You can either use a keyboard or just use your mouse. Go to the left of the mouse while you hold it down, or go to the right. Now it's 100% visibility. Now it's 0%, which means it's completely transparent. So these are over here are the parameter names, the transform property names, and these icons will go all. We will see them all around After Effects when we talk about properties or parameters. For example, click down the arrow, you have it here again. This stopwatch, as it's called, these are for creating keyframes, which will appear on that current time where the indicator, where the TGI is. So if we, for example, scroll here to frame, these are the frame 26. You can also, if you want to change this view with the frames, then you can just hold down Control and click, and then you will get it in a minute, hours, seconds. But I like to see it in frames, and you can see the frame rate here. So now we are at frame 26. Let's say I press the stopwatch for opacity here. When I click at this time, that means I clicked it while the value was 100%, and we have created a keyframe here. So if you move my time indicator, you see we have this blue diamond icon, and this is a keyframe. So let's move over here to frame 46. Now, because the time stopwatch is enabled, you can see that by its blue. This means whatever value you change here will add automatically another keyframe. So let's say from here I want to have it to 50%. Now another keyframe has been created. So let's see if I scroll back. Here it's 100%. Look at the value here, 100%. As I scrub through this keyframe at 26, which is 100%. Now look, now from this keyframe to the next keyframe where we set it to 50%. As you can see here, the opacity will decrease until we hit the 50% from this current time. Let's see. Now we're at 50%. So that adds up. So that's a little thing about the keyframes and stopwatches. And this is basically, as I said before, this is all the magic happens here, because when you add an effect or preset, then it will be the values here you'll also be playing with, keyframing, stopwatching, and of course you will change the frame. And the same thing here, if you go into position, add keyframe, go a little bit to the right. Remember, this is the X, this is Y. So let's go up. Okay, let's go back. So now let's see, if you hit the spacebar, it's gonna play on your keyboard. Yeah, so it does actually what it tells us to do. So if you want to undo all this, you can just hit the blue for the position, hit it. It's gonna undo the keyframes, and the same thing with the opacity. Just hit that. Now all keyframes are gone. Another thing with a shortcut, very good to know, it's hitting the U. So in this case, if you have any effects on or animation keyframes in general, let's say we put keyframe for position, scale, rotation here, and we go over here and we change them. Go back, and now let's press the transformation properties drop down. Okay, so now if you want to know where you want to only have your keyframing which is applied to this layer visible, you just hit the U on the keyboard. Now I hit U. Then the three key properties we applied the keyframing on, those only visible to us. So that's a smart little fix, that using the U on the keyboard you can have all your keyframes displayed, instead of using the drop down menu and go further down until you have a long list here, which can be seen on your monitor anyway. So let's undo those. I can also just hold down the mouse and do like this. You don't have to click one at a time. I can just drag it down. That will add. Okay, and up here at the composition window, you have some different menus down here. So basically, if you look at the pixels right now on my screen, I zoom in, this is set to half resolution. So when you do tutorials or basically are working, I would suggest that most of the time people will be working in a half resolution. Otherwise, it can be pretty laggy. So let's switch over to full. Look at the difference when I zoom out to here to fit up to 100%. So this is full resolution now. If I go back to half, little detail goes away, and the same thing with the third. It gets a little bit blurry. So it's a good thing working in half. And remember, spacebar, hitting spacebar will just play the preview, but not in real time. If you want to do a RAM preview, you hit 0 on your keyboard. I will do that now. So basically, that means this whole green bar is mean that this whole clip has been loaded into my RAM memory. So now it will just play in real time. So and again here, next to the resolution button, we have the channel and color mode management settings, where you can go through the different colors settings. The same thing here. This is just take a snapshot of the current frame, and here will show where the preview time, where you are. You can change the time to a preview from another state. And here, toggle mask and shape path visibility. So if I had a mask, it will be visible here, the lines. So let's take a quick example. Click my clip, then I go up to my tools panels, which is up here. So these will also be pretty known from if you've been working with Adobe's software in general, for example, Photoshop. So in this particular situation, we'll be using pen tool. So either press G or just press this button. We'll press it. Now I'll create a mask. This is my mask. When I connect with the last dot, then it will mask out everything around it. And again, if we hit U, it will hide everything. If we hit UU, it will show you that we have a mask applied. So with the mask applied, you can invert it if that's what if that's what you're going for. But the reason we did it was to show you that with the mask here, if you click this button with the toggle mask visibility, you see the mask goes away. You can't see the mask anymore. So that's basically this button here. So we can click on the mask and hit delete on the keyboard. Now it's gone again. So that was for the visibility button. This one, for this one, I actually if you need a grid or rulers, then you have rulers out here. You can drag them in if you want to do some precise offsetting with layers in between. And then what I mostly use this for, to be honest, is this one, the title action save. In here, then if I and there's a word set title. So if I add a title here, I will know that if it's within these inner borders, then it will be available to be displayed on every monitor in every household. But if it goes beyond these borders, the outer line here, then on some standard TVs it will not be showed on, depending on the region and of course the TV itself. But so if you want to be sure on the safe side that your text can be shown on every device, all monitors, then you should keep it within these inner lines here. Click that away. As I said before, After Effects is a real RAM hogger. So in another tutorial I will go in, of course, and talk about the advanced settings mode, which I have found working well for me. But just a quick tip: go over to the edit window and go down to preference, and then go down to, let's see, memory here. Depending on how much RAM you have, of course, leave a lot of RAM to After Effects, and then of course you should ensure that leave a little bit left for the rest of your Windows, for example, Windows. And general, I would say that a workflow like this, you will probably also have maybe Photoshop, another tracking system up like Mocha, Adobe Premiere Pro. So all these also need RAM to be able to actually run on your system. So make sure you leave enough RAM for other software to be running at the same time. But in this case, you can see I have left 6 GB for other software, and I have used the majority or two dedicated to After Effects, because as I said, it's a real RAM hogger. So in another tutorial, I will of course go in and discuss these settings here, only the most important ones, which an average user would be using. So this is just for a quick tip regarding the RAM. So another shortcut which is really good to use. Now you can see the last thing we used were a pen tool, that was G. To go back to the arrow selection tool, you will hit V on the keyboard. So remember V. So whatever you do, V is really good to use. And you hold down spacebar, a hand will appear. And this hand, if you hold down the mouse, you can drag the comp window around. So release that and release the spacebar. It will go back to your last tool. So still on the composition window, down here we have of course the comp window, what viewable size you want to set it on. And for the primary viewer, you can see this is just if you had also connected an external another monitor, you could use After Effects with. So this is the transparency grid. If we had transparency here, it will be shown. Otherwise, the standard view is just black background. But there is no real black background. Keep that in mind. It is transparent. So best way to show that is if I go down to the timeline window panel and select, click on the eyeball, so this layer will disappear. Look at the background now, it's just black. If I hit the transparency button, this is how if you render it out with an alpha channel, the background will just be empty. So this is just to toggle it off so you actually have something to work with. Otherwise, a common sense is also just to apply a black background, if it's black background you want, or whatever other background you want, then just apply that as a layer down here and give it that color. Active camera, this is the one we are looking at right now. Remember, After Effects is a 2.5D application software, so it can also work with different views depending on your camera setting. So it has a 3D camera you can apply to it, but we'll go into that in another tutorial. But it's not. That's why it's a 2.5D and not a 3D. So that means you can rotate around in it in a 3D space, but the files, the assets, the media, they are all flat. There's no depth in it. And again, over here you have your fast previews. I have a GeForce GTX 1060 graphic card using on this one with 6 gigabytes on. So basically I just left it at the standard view, but if you really want to use the higher ones, you can use the final quality, fast draft. So, and then you have different render options here. So this is more dependent on how your system is built. And again, the timeline, composition, flowchart, you can build them up in like a node with Gantt charts and everything on that respect. And of course, exposure. You can increase, decrease the exposure. So if you have a real dark image, you need to work in a little lighter environment, just increase this. Reset it again by hitting the reset button here. So back to our timeline panel. So down here at the timeline panel, let's select our footage and press Control D, which will duplicate this. So now we have 2. Just let's make some more. Okay. So I just muted the sound. So I want to talk about a little about this menu down here in the timeline. So these are the modes we talked about for these layers, and here the order of layers with the stacking I also talked about earlier. So this one is the top. You have under your mode, you have different blending modes, also known from Photoshop. So if you click standard, they all set on normal. If you click on the mode button, drop down, you'll get multiple options here. So whatever you do, just click on one of them, and the color mode here will be changed to the according to the one you just selected. So in this situation, it was add. So again, you can play around with all different modes and get some very interesting image out of that. So these over here, also in another tutorial, but these will be these are track mattes. So like you can, for example, use a footage here to be viewed in the cutout of the mask from the above layer. So if we had, for example, if this layer was a star, a mask of a star, and then you want this movie to be shown only within that star, you'll use a track matte for that. Over here, parenting. It is like it says, if you choose to parent this layer to that, then whatever that layer in respect of movement and scale so on, this will move accordingly to that also. So let's try with a normal layer. Control Y will create a solid. So let's create a solid. Make sure that the width and height is the same. You know what? We want to see actually the parent options. So let's just take 500 and 500, and let's make it red. Hit OK. So now we have a red square. Hit Control D to duplicate that. Move that out here. Go to the layer settings up here and press solid settings. Let's change the color of this one to blue. So now we have 2. Let's say that we parent the red one to the blue one. You go to this tool here that's called the pick whip. Just hold down your mouse button and drag it up to the above layer and release it. Now you can see the parent is the royal blue. So the parent is the royal blue right now, and let's see what happens. It parents to that, and if we for example move the blue layer, look what happens to the red layer. And same with the height, because it's parented to that red layer, it will follow it. Oh sorry, the red layer is parented to the blue layer, and then it will follow it regarding movements. And you will also be able to do that on every parameter After Effects has, and also with the plugins. So delete those. So that was a little bit about the blending modes. Let's go up here. So to be able to show actually the columns for these options here, you'll press F4 on your keyboard, or press this one, toggle switches mode. So this when you toggle switch mode, you can see this was a previous view. Now we have this view where you have the more options regarding, you can set these, you can enable these options here. So we'll talk about those. The first one, which looks like a creepy face, called shy layers. That means if you click on this layer and this layer, see how the creepy face becomes a flat face. These two are now shy layers. This is meant for if you have many layers and you need to have more overview, then the ones you are certain of that you don't use anymore or you don't need to modify anymore, make them shy layers, and then go to the main shy layer button. If you click that, then it's gonna shy these two layers. That means these gonna be hide out. Look at this, they're gone. They're not deleted, they just disappeared from the list. They're just hiding, not visible anymore. So if you click it again, they'll be visible again. This here, this is the quality and sampling. So if you press on it, you will get different quality modes regarding fast previews. You can get pixelated. So basically, you would leave it as in standard, because most computers, they have a decent graphic card and a CPU to work with this. But you can sometimes, for some situation, you will actually be changing that mode. Over here, frame blending. Again, frame blending only if you wanna achieve a specific view. So for example, if you're going for a specific situation where you need to have some pixel motion on, or be a little pixelated, you know, an old arcade game, Nintendo game, whatever. So you can get some pretty interesting modes with enabling that. This one here, that's just the motion blur. So if I enable motion blur for this layer, that means when I go back to the main motion blur button and press this, then there will be motion blur enabled only for this layer here. Motion blur is really RAM and preview sensitive, so remember that it can go pretty laggy. This one just shows if you have an adjustment layer applied. So if we right click again here in the timeline panel and choose new, and then choose adjustment layer. This is an adjustment layer, and that's why it has an adjustment layer mark over here. Adjustment layer just means that whatever effect you apply to this layer, all the layers below it will be affected by this adjustment layer. So there can be a specific color correction for this, and I would apply to all of them instead of you go in individually do it. So that's pretty awesome. You can do a lot of things with adjustment layer. Last button here, this is just for enabling 3D. So let's solo this layer, so we only see this layer, which is stack number 2. If we make a 3D of that, you'll get the X, Y, and Z coordination, where you can now use your camera tool, because now you have a 3D layer. So if you right click again and choose new camera, just go with the standard preset. Okay, now you have a camera. If you take the camera for using the camera tools you have up here, here's the unified camera tools. If you press down, you get a little arrow out. You can see all of the shortcut keyboard tabs are C. So now we have enabled the camera. Let's look what happens when I press C. See how the mouse icon changes. So basically this one and this one are the orbit tools. This one are the zoom forward or go forward and or to the sides, and this is a zoom forward and back. So as you see, now I'm holding down the mouse, I'm orbiting around it. It's orbiting as it's a 3D layer, but it's flat as you see it, completely flat. Reset it. Okay, let's remove the 3D layer for that. Okay guys, so this was just a very basic short tutorial regarding interface and layout modes, and a little bit, you know, about the different tabs, the different panels, how you can reorder, and you know, we also went a little bit about the different parameters and what really drives the animations here in After Effects. So I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you on the next lesson. So stick around.